A little test.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hey guys, welcome back to the Pharos Fit podcast. Good to be back with you again. We are back at the Pharos Mountain Lodge. Brandon's come up the hill once more. Thanks for coming up, Brandon.
It was a pleasure. Like I told you, it's the only thing I'm getting exercise in the past month is coming to put this place together, which I love. I'm not complaining about it at all.
Yeah, as usual, Brandon arrives to find a stack of tasks to get done. But yeah, we're making pretty good progress here. The gym's, it's not finished, but it's coming along well. I put the flooring down yesterday, which looks really good. I use this new flooring that I hadn't done before. Previously, I've used rolls, and this was this interlocking
The puzzle pieces.
Yeah. It was great.
Was it?
Oh my god, it was so good. It was just so much easier because rolls are just so fucking heavy.
People don't realize when you have to pick that up and move it
They
places.
Are
it's the worst.
Heavy, and it's cheaper, but the problem is with it. If ever you have any issues with the floor, like if the floor cracks underneath the roll, you got to take the whole damn roll up. Like you can't just cut out sections because you have to glue it down and stuff. It's a fucking nightmare. With these pads, anything goes wrong underneath, you can just take out the pad and fix it and replace the pad. I'm never going back to rolls.
Everyone stop with the rolls.
Everyone's still with rolls. Today, guys, we are gonna flip last week's podcast on its head, and this week we are going to talk about mass gain. We're going to talk about gaining weight, gaining muscle, because a lot of people, having listening to last week's podcast, were like, yeah, but what about if I'm trying to gain weight? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. As I said, Brandon's with me, and Brandon just got back from Georgia, right?
Yeah, I was in Augusta, Georgia, doing some content for a basketball tournament. And it's a whole Nike thing. These young kids, most of them are going to be in the NBA. So it's just, it was great actually looking back and seeing how crazy I used to be in love with this game and seeing all these kids in that phase and in that moment. It's nuts.
Incredible. And you were saying like the standard of these youngsters now is just phenomenal. The power of them and the skill they have at that age.
Yeah, physically they're in such terrible movement and functionality modalities. Like their hips and hamstrings, if they were a rubber band, they are just fully stretched, and at any moment they could snap. Luckily, they're still 17, 18 years old, so they don't feel that. They're not going to pop anything, or if they do, it's out for 2 minutes and back in. But I just know from my own, I used to have those terrible tight hamstrings and hips, but I could run a 4.340.
Get away with it.
Cold, out of the car. Oh, let's go. So I can't imagine if these kids just had good, proper training and nutrition already at where they're going.
Yeah.
It could just be so much, even more that they could tap into to their physical gifts, because these kids are just the power and strength and speed they have and everything. Even I'm a generation before them, like the difference. Yeah, there's just so many more kids than there were then.
It's amazing.
Just have that peak performance.
And if you ever watch like the CrossFit kids, who are coming up now, like 14, 15, 16 years old, the stuff that these kids can do, the weight that they can lift, the poundage, it's just phenomenal. I can imagine. I struggle to get my head around it. Like 19 years old, like 400 pounds. Like I don't know how people are doing it. And it's curious because CrossFit's such a young sport. It's curious to see where those athletes are by the time they're 30. Like the wear and tear on the body, lifting that amount and doing that kind of volume of work at such a young age. I wonder how their bodies are going to cope by the time they're 30. I mean, we just don't know because it's never been done before. Absolutely.
It's like with football and the amount of ACL injuries.
Right.
And even basketball now, because you have such large individuals, it's not necessarily, because you think about soccer, they're moving and jerking, but there's not that many non-contact like hits or injuries. But with just football and basketball especially, you have these additional hits that happen to these quick jerking motions, and these tendons and ligaments, as much as they are getting stronger and be able to absorb so much more contact, they can only take so much. These ACLs are popping like crazy still. Because with the physical nature of the game and these guys moving faster, hitting harder, our bodies physically can only evolve and adapt so much more quickly than.
What's interesting to me, and full transparency on this podcast, guys, me and Brandon, we are drinking Coors Banquet today because it's hot. My fridge was broken, and the only thing accessible to us was ice cold Coors Banquet. So if this podcast falls off the rails, that's why. But it's interesting to me how, on one side of the spectrum, you've got these kind of athletes and athletic kids who are getting stronger and stronger and more powerful and fitter than we've ever been. And then the other side of it, on the juxtaposition of that, you've got people like getting like less, like more unhealthy and more unfit than we've ever been. And you've got this huge like divergence of
there's becoming more of a
extremes.
split rather than a majority from the center.
Yeah,
growing in between. It's
exactly because the difference between the people that are on the high end of athletics and these people who are just like completely destroying their metabolisms in all kinds of horrible ways is just growing and growing and growing in this completely opposite direction. It's just so curious to me.
But that because it's that knowledge, like as much as we might think that this is like common stay, like we're still in a bubble, especially
Such
being
a
in
small
Los
bubble,
Angeles.
yeah.
Like you listen to podcasts and radio shows, as do I. I'm listening to this guy talk about, all these different psychoactive substances that are being used for medicinal properties and benefits. But even if I go back to Florida, when I start talking podcasts and health, like there's still even a smaller space of people who can absorb that. So, because I think about when I was in high school and I'm chugging a Gatorade, M&Ms, and like strawberry Mentos before practice before we do a 3-hour workout.
Right.
And I'm making that happen like it's nothing. And like maybe eating a cheeseburger and fries after, like, I didn't know that till even after college, after I had all these injuries and trauma. I really had to dig deep because getting all these opioids handed to me from doctors was not helping at all. Even though I could still play and win MVP of a basketball tournament, but was, I'm drooling on the phone after because I'm just non-coherent. But like, you really take the time to learn that. You really got to dive deep to find that information out.
Yeah, it's interesting with nutrition because a lot of us don't really take nutrition seriously until we get into our 30s and 40s. Like we kind of like, I remember when I started weightlifting, when I started kind of bodybuilding in my teens, and you would have some information if you really, like you said, looked for it, and it was about protein and making sure that you got calories in, but it was very kind of vague and very like you said, you had to really look for it. Whereas now it's very, very accessible to us. With the internet and so forth, we can find out whatever we want to find out. But I think it's something we kind of like, because you can get away with so much in your 20s, you just don't really pay attention to it until your 30s and 40s, when you do have to start paying attention. Otherwise, you just simply don't get anywhere. But I wonder, and like I said, with these CrossFit kids and this next generation, I wonder because maybe they are looking at that stuff and maybe they are taking that stuff seriously. Maybe that's the difference between an 18-year-old athlete now and an 18-year-old athlete 20 years ago is just our knowledge nutritionally. Of course, training has advanced, but I think our knowledge of nutrition and supplementation and all the factors that can help improve performance have improved so much. Maybe that's the factor that's making these kids so much better.
I like to think so, but I think it just like there's still like you want to think like conspiracy theories, like the conspiracy theories are right in front of you that happen. Most people are being bombarded with all this different shit, multi-level marketing of just got to go do this and take this supplement or eat this food or, colorful, bright colored cereal. It's okay to eat this. It's got 9 minerals and vitamins. And it's like, once you're bombarded so much that like stimulates the brain to say like, oh, this is kind of good. It's got, a serving of vegetables in it, but it's like a bunch of whole wheat from something that's completely artificially pumped in and it's not necessarily there. And then most people these days have to work their ass off just to, find time at the end of the day, and they don't have the time to cook for themselves. And the difference from actually preparing your own food.
Yeah, for sure.
To going off and getting it. And not everybody can even get, something that's going to be a decent salad bowl with, a good base protein in there and something else. Like, unfortunately, most people just don't have the time.
It's fun. It's funny because sometimes I feel like saying to people, they want like a diet, like, right, what should I eat? What macro should I eat? I'm trying to lose weight. If I said to someone, You're not allowed to order any takeout for a month. You have to cook all your own food, and that's the only thing I'm going to ask you to do. You have to cook all your own food. I guarantee most people would just lose weight automatically or lose fat automatically.
It is that easy.
Because, you know, when you order takeout, when you order from restaurants and that kind of stuff, you know, you have to remember that food is being mass produced. And when food is being mass produced, the quality of the food is going to be compromised. The oils that they're cooking in is going to be cheaper oils.
Think about the margins we got to make. So we got to cut down on that oil.
Yeah.
It's canola oil instead of an olive oil.
Yeah.
Not even the extra virgin.
Yeah.
And those things, like, they catch up.
They do. It all adds up. And if you do really focus on preparing and cooking your own food, you know exactly what's in it. You know, you're using fresh ingredients. You know, that alone just makes such a huge difference. You know, especially if you're very conscious about where your food is coming from, where you're buying your food, where you're ordering it from, and you're focusing on the nutritional quality of that food. You know, it's just a game changer. And it's interesting when I came to the States, because in England, when I was growing up, you know, we would cook most of our food. I mean, we maybe ordered takeout like once every fucking month, maybe.
It was like a Chinese or...
but it was like a very rare thing. You know, my mum, my dad very rarely, would always cook. There would be no ordering out or eating, you know. We weren't the kind of family that would like, oh, we're going to eat out tonight. We'll go out for a meal. You know, maybe we go to the pub like, you know, once every couple of weeks or something for a meal.
There's very little that's going to be on that menu. That's going to be very
varying.
Yeah,
the percentage of food that was like ordered in was very low, and the percentage of food that was cooked from home was very high. And I think that was a huge factor in me growing up like somewhat healthy, and then coming here and realizing that people really don't cook much that here. I mean, I think when I first went to university in Salt Lake City in 1999, very few people went to the grocery store and bought like food to cook. Everyone was just eating out all the time, whether
cup
it was
of
like
noodles, or
Subway or cup of noodles
somewhere.
or pizzas or burgers. It was just like this constant stream of like easy to order takeout food, and nobody was really taking the time to cook or anything like that. So it was kind of like it was a real eye opener for me in that sense. And I remember, you know, when you went to Iceland, you said almost the same. Like, I think when you live in America, you almost take for granted, you know, how readily available takeout food is and how easy it is and how it's just like
or just
ingrained.
Resources themselves.
Yeah.
Like, we take it for granted here. Like you go to some other countries where you're just like,
it's not available. You can't do it.
It's not in season, or
right.
We don't get it. We haven't gotten it here in 3 years. Like,
right.
Once you see that, or it's just like, what's on the menu? It's like, we have porridge, and you're here to play professional sports, but all we have, because you're staying in an orphanage house right now, is porridge. So guys, like, we haven't got paid yet. We can't even go get McDonald's to go eat. You guys are gonna have to eat this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so when you see it, you're like, you know, when you walk into a grocery store in America too, it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, and
it's incredible.
It's kind of cool being in Idlewild, because it's kind of the same thing. Yes, there are restaurants here. Yes, we can order in if we want to, but we're trying to do that as little as possible, just simply because like there's not the kind of like supermarkets here that there are, you know, in the city. So, you know, obviously I get my butcher box. I bring all my meat up. I cook a lot of meat in the Traeger, that kind of stuff. I think a lot more about like how I'm going to prepare food and how I'm going to prepare the evening meal, stuff like that. And it's a lot more of a conscious thing than, you know, when you're in the city, you've just got so much available. It's just so easy to just,
it's so hard,
you know,
not to cook for yourself some nights.
Yeah.
Like you said, to go out, like,
yeah,
I'm a sucker for it too. Like, oh, I love French food. So you say, go to a French restaurant. It's like, but then you think about it, because I also have a membership to Restaurant Depot. So you go to the restaurant wholesaler too, and just like, even if I go to Vaughn's or like even like just a regular grocery chain, just like where I'm not getting like an organic piece of food and everything, it's like, oh, I can't pay this much.
I know.
I don't like a $50 for a steak and a potato or you know, whatever. It's like, I can't do it. It breaks my heart knowing how much it actually costs and the markups are.
It's crazy. But it is also, if you do like live alone and you are just cooking for yourself, sometimes it feels like a lot of effort to cook food for one. You know what I mean? Whereas if you've got a family and you're cooking for like 3 people, like the effort to cook seems worth it. Whereas like sometimes when you're on your own, it's like, oh, do I want to go to all that hassle just for myself when I could just like
Agreed. I mean, I've been a semi-professional cook and had to prepare meals for individuals, so I kind of enjoy it. Like oh, I'm going Italian tonight. I'm watching The Sopranos a lot. Go get a nice red wine from the store.
Yeah.
I get a fresh ball of mozzarella. Gonna make
Yeah.
a special antipasta. Gonna prepare some pasta sauce. The whole works, and there's a deeper connection to it. Like if you have that
sure.
understanding to it,
Yeah.
where it's just like, oh, I'm gonna
You
sit
appreciate
down
it so much more.
with my sister. We're gonna enjoy this meal. Nothing's on. Like there's really something breaking the bread. Like there's something ceremonial.
Well, you know what the extreme of that is. If you watch Alone, the show on TV with the so Alone season 7, and we will get into hypertrophy in a second, I promise. Alone season 7, they put I think it's 10 people in the Arctic, and
What time of year?
well, just before winter. So if they can survive for 100 days in the Arctic, they get $1 million. If they can survive for 100 days,
No
for
housing,
$1 million.
no nothing? Or
They're
they have
allowed 10 items. So they get dropped off in the Arctic. They're allowed 10 items. So they might take a fishing net. They might take an axe. A couple of people take saws. They take a tarp. Like 10 items you're allowed to take.
Oh, do you get 10 each?
Huh?
Or they get 10 as a team?
No, each. And they get
That
put
sounds like more than enough supplies you need right there.
for 100 days in the Arctic.
Depending on the time of year,
Oh my God.
I got to the Arctic Circle in Iceland.
They go into the winter. So they arrive, I think, in the fall, and it goes into the winter. So they have some time to prepare for the winter. And, of course, when you put in that situation, everybody has to kill their own food, right? So everyone has to set out their traps. They have to fish. They have to hunt. You can only eat what you can kill. And you can forage, obviously, on whatever berries and mushrooms you can find. But obviously, that's not going to be possible in the winter. So you have to, store your food. You have to dry your fish out, dry your steaks out,
the meats,
and find a way to secure it and keep it safe from wild animals.
Yeah.
Start making your jerky, all that kind of stuff. But the overwhelming sense you get from is how much you appreciate food when you have to go to so much fucking work to get it. When your life depends on, making that kill or catching that fish.
But like you said, the most important part too after was protecting it, protecting from other animals who want to eat.
Yeah.
From other people who might want that food. Like you said, the whole preparing for that part of the year where it was much more of a downtime. There was less activity, and just trying to survive the elements.
Yeah.
But the most importantly, what country were they in the Arctic in? This is determined.
It's on the Canadian Arctic border.
Okay. If they're in Russia, that I'd say, that'd be a tough one to make right there. Yeah. If you're in Greenland, that's another tough one to survive. But if you're in Scandinavia, in the Arctic up there's more than enough trees. There's more than
I
enough.
don't know, dude. I think it's fucking hard.
I'm gonna watch the show. I'm gonna check it out.
I watch these guys. I'm like, God, these are real human beings.
Kudos to the cameramen who want to go with them.
Yeah. Well, there are no cameramen, so they get given a camera. They get given a camera setup, and they have to record themselves. The only thing they're left with is a sat phone to call in if they want to quit.
How many people make it?
Well, I don't know on this season, but in prior seasons, only one survives. It's whoever lasts the longest is the winner. Whereas this season,
it's not even 100 days. You gotta.
No, this season it's 100 days. If you make it 100 days, you get $1 million. That's the challenge.
Doesn't matter who. It just.
So and I haven't. I think I'm 4 episodes in, so I don't know how many people survive it, but it's you watch it and you realize it's a great indicator of evolution, how we survived in nature, how we were able to exist, and what it took to get this far. And then it's a huge reminder just of how much we take for granted and how easy we've made things for ourselves and how convenient we've made things for ourselves. Where in the real world, in the wild, my God, it takes so much, and it takes so much skill and so much depth of human excellence to really, survive. And you watch these men and women do their thing, and it's oh my God, these are real people. These people know how to survive.
Especially because that risk, if one thing doesn't go your way, or this little hole you did find that's got a place for you to hold a fire gets caved in or flooded in, what do you do now in the middle of winter? You're kind of
it's honestly incredible. And getting, circling back to the hypertrophy thing, the people alone, the first thing they try and, find is protein and fats, because they know that's what they need to survive. They need, if they want to hold on to their strength, their any kind of muscle tissue, they're going to need to get their protein. Protein is the building blocks of life. You have to have it. And fat, they need the fat for energy. They need the fat to stay warm. They need the fat for to stay cognitive, for all their hormones. So they're desperate. They're desperate to find protein. They're desperate to find good fats, because they know that that's what they need to survive. So circling back to the subject of muscle mass, of lean muscle, of hypertrophy. Again, flipping this on kind of the head from last week, where we talked about leaning out as much as possible and some protocols for that. When we want to go the other direction, when we want to gain muscle, when we want to gain mass, how do we do that? How do we go from a state of, being, maybe we're not as big as we think we should be, or we don't carry as much muscle as we think we want to, or maybe we see people that we think, oh, I'd love to look like that, or, or even from an athletic point of view, so maybe if I was bigger, I'd be able to do that. I'd be able to lift that weight. I'd be able to throw that object that far. There's a number of tasks maybe I would be able to complete if I added some muscle tissue. There's all number of reasons for adding muscle mass. It could purely be for health reasons, which, it is a huge factor in terms of health as well. So, this is something. When we talk about gaining muscle, this isn't just something for, oh my God, I want to be a huge bodybuilder. This is, I want to gain muscle because I want to be healthier. I want to be able to pick up my kids. I want to be able to walk for longer. I want to be able to hold on to as much lean muscle tissue as I get older, so that my structure doesn't deteriorate. So there are all manner of reasons for gaining muscle and hypertrophy. Now, one of the things to remember that's super important is that in the beginning, everything works. Everything works, but nothing works forever. So often in the beginning, for 3 to 6 months, maybe longer, you will get hypertrophy and you will get good results from doing whatever the fuck you want. So often, I would advise people in the beginning to just do circuit training, just do whatever physical sport you can do to get the body moving, because just by virtue of that, you will gain muscle tissue. A lot of people who do CrossFit gain muscle in the beginning, and that might seem, juxtaposed from the hypertrophy protocol. Well, it's just high intensity training. How can that possibly, gain muscle? Well, I've seen it time and time again. People in the beginning gain a lot of muscle tissue because you are lifting weights. Short rest periods have been shown to improve growth hormone release and boost testosterone. And obviously, they're doing a lot of strength training. They're lifting huge poundages ultimately over a longer period of time. And there's a lot of volume in your training. You're asking your body to do a lot of different tasks. You've got constant new stimulation from all these different things. So your body's never fully adapting to anything. It's constantly being challenged. So even with something like CrossFit, I see a lot of hypertrophy, especially in beginners. And in fact, I was having this conversation with Joshua Alshama the other day, who's a huge CrossFit guy. He's actually the best CrossFitter in the UK right now. And he told me he used to do a lot of bodybuilding in his teens. And then he said he actually saw a lot more hypertrophy when he started doing CrossFit. And if you saw this guy, he looks kind of like a bodybuilder. He's got a lot of muscle mass on his body. He's one of the most, one of the more muscular CrossFitters out there. And I think the combination of the short rest periods and the volume and the large poundages of weight and all that kind of stuff, plus he's the kind of guy that's going to pay attention to nutrition, resulted in a lot of gains in muscle tissue. So once again, we are all different. Individualization is a huge thing. Some things work better for some protocols, work better for some people than they do for others. But I think, it's true universally that in the beginning, everything works, but nothing works forever. Like whatever you do in the beginning, you are going to get some gains. Now, of course, whatever you do, by virtue of what I just said, nothing works forever. At some point, you're going to have to create new stimulus or pay more attention to nutrition or really think about what you're doing and really schedule things out. Nutritionally, of course, when we talked before about getting leaner, we have to find ways to create a calorie deficit if we wanted to lean out. And often that comes by way of limiting our carbohydrate content or limiting our fat content or a combination of the two things. Of course, when we want to gain weight, when we want to go the other way, we're almost going to have to do the reverse. We're going to have to think about taking in more carbohydrates and potentially more fats, as well as obviously keeping our protein content high. Obviously, when we think about protein, remember we talked last week, we always need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, almost. Maybe 0.8 grams, maybe 1.2 grams, but around that 1 gram per pound, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is going to be, a good amount of protein for most people. And we always want to hold on to as much lean muscle tissue as we can because we want a healthy metabolism, and that's what helps us keep a healthy metabolism. When it comes to trying to gain weight, gain further muscle mass, maybe we are also upping the volume of lifting that we're doing. We're going to have to start thinking about taking in more carbohydrates, taking in more fats, and by virtue of that, of course, taking in more calories. If I'm trying to lose weight, let's take me as an example. As a 200-pound male, I may take my calories down to 22,000 calories a day.
2,200.
2,200, maybe.
22,000?
Oh, 22,000. That would be.
I was going to say.
That'd be a hell of a day.
That's the banquet.
2,200, sorry, yeah. 2,200 calories per day. If I'm trying to gain weight, if I'm trying to gain mass, I might take in as many as 5,000 calories a day. If I want to, gain a lot of muscle in a short amount of time or a lot of weight in a short amount of time. So the most important thing is always going to be calories. Like, how many calories am I consuming to achieve my goal? And then after we've figured out how many calories we want, we start breaking it down more into proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Now, like I just said, we're taking in 1 gram, maybe 1.2 grams, maybe even 1.4 grams of protein per pound of body weight if we're trying to gain mass. After that, we're going to want to bring in at least 1 gram of fat per kilogram of body weight. Remember to calculate kilograms, you're going to multiply it by 2.22. And then if I'm looking to gain weight, I might take my calories up to 2 grams of carbs per pound of body weight, maybe even higher, maybe even 2.5. I might want to take my carbs up to 400 grams a day if I want to gain weight, maybe even higher. Of course, it depends on your volume, how much work you're getting done, how big you are, your weight, that kind of stuff. But we have to realize that the only way we are going to be able to gain and sustain weight is to be in a caloric surplus. It's the only way that our body is going to say, okay, I'm going to grow. I don't need to conserve. I don't need to protect. I'm going to allow the body to grow because I've got enough calories to let it grow. I think often the trap that people fall into is they'll do it for like a very short period of time. So they think, oh, I'm gonna gain weight. I'm gonna up my calories. I'm gonna up my carbs. They'll do it for a very short period of time. They don't really get the results they want, and then they stop doing it, and they don't really get anywhere. People have to realize that this is a long-term thing. You can't just do it for a couple of weeks and expect results. You have to, you have to figure out your plan. You have to stick with it, and it might take 6 weeks to really see any kind of real gain. Now, the most I've ever done I'm 200 pounds now. I was probably maybe 185 when I did this protocol, was the kind of 5,000 calories a day diet.
That sounds insane.
Which sounds insane. And it was...
I struggle to put down 3,000 if I really want to go.
It was kind of insane. And it was actually at the time, I was doing a lot of work with Jim Jones at the time. And it was part of the Henry Cavill mass gain for the Superman film.
Were you working with him himself, or just
no? I wasn't at the time. I was involved with Jim Jones, obviously, and I was fully satisfied with them at the time, and I was following a lot of their programs and protocols. and they released the Henry Cavill nutritional program as well as the training program. And Henry's protocol was basically this mass gain diet, which was 5,000 calories a day, and he was a similar weight to me, so I was doing a very similar thing. Now, in order to get 5,000 calories down a day, I had to do these like super highly caloric shakes. It was the only way to get the calories in that I needed. Like basically each shake had 1,000 calories in.
So you're adding probably a good amount of fat with,
yes.
with the protein and carbs that are
Fats
usually
and
already
carbs.
in there.
Yeah. So it was kind of going against everything I talked about last week, like not combining fats and carbs in the same meal and all that kind of stuff. It was like all that.
You need to if you're going that big.
You had to.
Yeah.
You have to.
So I think about protein shakes only got like 240, maybe 500.
300 maybe. So by the time you've added, so what I was doing was like obviously whole fat milk, banana, peanut butter, oats, with the whey,
the typical weight gain shit,
cream, like everything in there to up the calories. Like I said, I was taking in 2,000 calories from shakes and then 3,000 calories from real food.
That doesn't sound too bad. That sounds doable.
It's doable, but people forget like it's hard to eat that much food and not feel disgusting, and you're just not hungry. You just don't want to eat.
It's hard to process that protein too. I feel like sometimes if I'm doing too much protein, you have the runs, like your body's not handling it, not absorbing it. So it's just like trying to make sure your body can just take on all that protein and actually synthesize it with, your muscles. Like it's tough that people aren't used to that.
Yeah. So I think, people have to realize that eating becomes a real job when you're trying to gain weight. The training part is relatively easy. The eating part is really hard because you have to really plan out your day. Because in order to get that amount of calories in, you're going to have to start eating early, and you're going to have to be really vigilant about when your meals are coming, when your protein is coming, when your carbs are coming, because otherwise you're gonna fall short of your numbers. You have to prepare, you have to plan, and you have to know what's coming. You have to be really, really vigilant and really on top of it because, even from experience, there are a number of days where I got to the end of the day and I was like, it was 9 p.m. at night and I was still 1,000 calories short. It's like, oh my God, you're trying to scoff down whatever you can get your hands on at that time of night just to get the calories up. So, you have to plan ahead. Obviously, you still want to eat, as much real food as possible, but you're not going to get 5,000 calories from chicken and broccoli. It's not going to happen.
You need those 9 grams from the fat. You need it.
You need the fat.
That helps.
Yeah.
Without going outside your macros. Because what were your macros at that time if you're trying to get 5,000 calories?
Offhand, I can't remember exactly what my macros were, but I
like
think
the split. What was the?
Yeah, I was probably more like a 50-30-20 split. 50% from carbs.
50% from carbs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because you have to remember, with carbs are what make you hungry. Fat's actually satiating. So if you eat too many fats, you just don't get hungry. Whereas carbs are moreish, right? You can always eat more carbs. So I was taking in more carbs to get the calories up to keep me hungry. So yeah, the carbs were, I was probably taking at least 400 grams of carbs a day at that point. But it worked. Like I put on, I think at my heaviest, I was like 225, which for me is fucking huge. It's 25 pounds heavier than I am now. I felt terrible. Like walking was a struggle. Like I felt heavy walking up the stairs. You just
your knuckles feel like you're grinding the ground.
Yeah, you just feel kind of like, ugh. Yeah. You're completely full all the time. You feel lethargic. Your body doesn't want to do it. And I was doing it all naturally. Obviously, I wasn't taking any steroids. I wasn't taking anything like that. So it was all done with real food and real, I was taking creatine, whey protein, fish oils, all that kind of stuff, zinc, but I wasn't taking anything anabolic.
That's what I was gonna ask. Like I was like, I'm trying to go Brad Pitt, Fight Club. I have the lean physique already.
Right.
I know he was doing a cycle during that movie as well. But right there, is that just upping, or just working out that much more in terms of...
Brad Pitt in Fight Club is fucking tiny. He's 135 pounds.
He's chiseled, but still, pretty big muscle, especially in the abs. Like, just, oh, wow. Was he only 135 for that?
Yeah, he's fucking tiny.
Really?
Maybe 140, but yeah, tiny.
Well, I'm 160, 165 right
but
now.
But he's got the kind of physique. He's got really small hips. He's got broad shoulders relative to his hips. he's just got that kind of ectomorph body type. So as soon as you add any muscle, the guy looks ripped. But yeah, he's tiny in Fight Club. That's not. He's bigger in Troy. If you watch the movie Troy,
Great movie.
yeah, he's a lot bigger in that. And I read a good article where he said, "Oh yeah, we had to up the protein for Troy." I was like, all right.
It's funny. I've read he did a cycle for Fight Club.
Oh, he did?
But yeah, totally, completely. I mean, he's probably twice the size in his arm, 3 times in Troy itself. I mean,
right.
We had to get a bunch of these Greek Spartans and Athenian lookalikes in these outfits and how they're going to stand out.
Yeah. Curious. But yeah, so when you gain that much weight, and I did it, I think I did it in a 10-week time period. So it was progressive. But I stuck to the program exactly. I stuck to the nutrition exactly, and it worked. And then after the 10 weeks, I kind of leaned out and probably went back down to around, 200, 195, and I looked pretty good. So that is kind of the classic way of doing it. You go through a bulking phase, where you are in a huge caloric surplus. You're taking a lot more nutrients than you normally do, a lot more calories than you normally do. And you have to understand that when you do that, not only will you gain muscle, you will also gain fat, and that is part of the process. You can't expect to stay lean when you're doing that kind of a bulk. And I think that's why a lot of people give up. And that's why I've given up a number of times, because you start to gain fat, you start to be a little bit uncomfortable. You're like, oh, I don't really want to do this. And you finish it. But the people that do this well, and the people that do this professionally, they stick with it for a long period of time. They give their body what it needs to grow. And then when it's time to cut, eventually they'll cut back down again. But just understand that when you bulk like that, when you try and gain a lot of mass, you are going to gain fat along with your muscle. It's just part of the process. And then you trim the fat after the mass gain. So don't assume that, I'm going to stay lean throughout this whole process. It's not going to happen. That said, if you take a much more a longer term approach, a more measured approach of okay, I'm not going to go 5,000 calories a day. I'm maybe going to up my calories by 300 a day. But I'm going to take a longer term approach. I'm going to give myself 12 months to add 10 pounds of muscle, as opposed to think of, I'm going to try and gain 20 pounds of muscle in 8 weeks, whatever it is. That way you will gain less fat, and you will gain a steady amount of muscle in a longer time frame. So for a lot of people, I think that's just a better way of doing it. If you're thinking about scaling it long term, as opposed to oh my God, I've got a movie that I've got to prepare for in 6 months' time. I'm going to gain as much weight as possible and then cut up. I'm going to do terrible things to my body in this process because it's worth it. Then, that's why they take that approach. But for a lot of people, members of the general public, I think it's a lot better to take a long-term strategy and think, okay, I'm going to give myself a year to gain 10 pounds of muscle, and I'm going to up my calories by 300 calories a day. I'm going to make sure those calories are coming from good sources. It's just a better way of doing it long term. I think also, coinciding with the nutrition, at a certain point, people need to think about what type of training they're doing. Now, of course, in the beginning, I told you everything works, but nothing works forever. So in the beginning, circuit training is fine. You'll gain a certain amount of muscle that way. You talked about Brad Pitt and Fight Club. I'm pretty sure Brad Pitt and Fight Club just did basic circuit training, 12 to 15 reps of bench press, 12 to 15 reps of lat pull down.
I went through the workout,
12 to 15 reps of curls.
It seemed boring. I was like, I couldn't do this for 6 weeks and try and get that body. That's just...
Yeah,
I love the 8x8 you showed me. It was 30-second rest time. That's...
I doubt Brad did many leg days because he didn't have any leg. It
was in parachute pants and
parachute pants. But yeah, that would be a fairly simple, almost like a strength endurance kind of protocol. But there are a number of protocols that I like that we use at Pharos Athletic Club, or when I have hypertrophy clients. Obviously, we've just been through the German volume cycle, the 10x10 with 1 minute rest. Ooh. Which is a great, hypertrophy cycle. Charles Poliquin cycle. I've used it a ton over the years. It's very effective. I really like the Y3T protocol by Neil Hill. which is essentially you divide your weeks up into 3-week sections. Week 1, you're lifting heavier weights with a lower rep range. Week 2, slightly lighter weights with a medium rep range. And then week 3, you're lifting lighter weights with a higher rep range. That way you're working all the different muscle fiber types through the 3-week process. And then you kind of start that cycle again. So it's this nice cycle of, heavy, medium, light, heavy, medium, light, heavy, medium, light. Classic bodybuilding movements. There's a lot of compound as well as a lot of isolation. Don't forget your isolation movements when it comes to hypertrophy. At a certain point, it's going to become necessary. Yes, you can get great hypertrophy from your compound movements and your squats, your deadlifts, and your pull-ups. But at a certain point, you are going to have to accessorize with some isolation movements if hypertrophy is the goal. And Y3T, talks you through that. German Body Comp, another great Charles Poliquin protocol, designed more for a lean body mass, but is another great way to achieve hypertrophy. It's just basic circuit training, but with brains. It's very well set out. A great kind of like I said, lean mass kind of protocol. We talked a little bit about Gironda 8x8 with the 30-second rest. It's a great hypertrophy protocol. Again, that short rest period, that 30-second rest period is great for growth hormone, great for testosterone release. Gets a lot of work done in a short amount of time. My guys at Gym Jones are actually on the 8x8 protocol right now, getting great results from it. It's a great mass builder, but also because of the short rest period is a great fat burner. Now I would say with that protocol, if you're in a great caloric surplus, it can be a great way to gain weight. If you're in a caloric deficit, it's a great way to lose weight.
Absolutely, because I feel like my heart rate stays
right
between, we'll say 120 average. When I'm doing a good 8x8, I'm pushing myself with a good amount of weight. Like let's say I go 135 or 155 for a back squat. In between that, it's a lot of demand to go back and forth and back and forth. I'm a 165 guy, so for me, it's like if I'm hitting that, my heart rate's high. I'm feeling that burn. But even any other muscle group, I'm working the upper body or the lower body, it's got the demand I'm looking for. That.
It's great. And like I said, it can be confusing for people because I know we're doing it right now at Gym Jones as part of our actual leaning out phase because they're in a caloric
It's more for
deficit.
a leaning out thing, yeah. It keeps me
but if you are in a huge caloric surplus, it's a great way to get mass gain. I forgot to mention this under the German volume section. Last week was the last week of our German volume at Pharos. And me and my buddy Justin were at 10 by 10 at 225. So it's 10 by 10 at 225 with 1 minute rest. I kid you not, I had to lie down for about 40 minutes after we did that workout.
225, what were you doing, back squat?
Yeah, 225 back squat. So 10 by 10, 225, 1 minute rest. And I did all sets 10 by 10, apart from the very last rep on the 10th set. I got about halfway up and my legs just fucking gave out. And I was like, but it was great. It's like I took my body as far as I could possibly take it, as far as it was willing to go. And then my body just said, fuck you. And that was it.
But that's why we have spotters. That's what the spotters are for.
But it was a great example of, when you are trying to grow and when you are trying to achieve hypertrophy, you have to push your body into places that you don't want it to go. You can't just coast and expect growth. It just doesn't work. You have to push the muscles. The classic thing in pumping iron, Arnold talking about those last 2 reps is when the muscle really grows. You have to take your body somewhere it doesn't want to go you have to create a stress. You have to create a demand on the muscle. Otherwise, it's just not going to grow. So always remember that. And I think that's whichever one of these protocols that you're doing, always remember that nothing will work if you're not challenging your body, if you're not pushing, through the pain barrier, if you're not challenging yourselves, if you're not trying to grind out, a little bit more than you want to, a couple more reps than you want to, a little bit more weight than you want to. Not to say people should be going out and hurting themselves with weight that they can't possibly lift, but always remember that the growth only happens at the extremities. You have to really push and challenge your body if you want to grow. The other one I had down here in terms of, the hypertrophy protocols, I wrote down, well, the classic one is like the 3x10, right? You're going to see that in every magazine, every Men's Health magazine,
any blog.
The classic kind of like,
we get some shoulder tricep exercise. Oh, you're gonna hit like 3x10 to 3x12.
Yeah, 3x10 to 12, or 3x8 to 12, or 4x10, or maybe 4x8. Anything in that hypertrophy rep range of 8 to 12, you're going to see a lot of that. And obviously, we've talked about this in podcasts before, but once you start adding in tempo to a lot of this work, which I do in a lot of my programming, that eccentric work, that those slow eccentric contractions really help with hypertrophy. That 4010, that 3010 tempo.
What we call those like negatives too.
The negatives, the eccentric contractions under control, and that slower tempo really help with muscular growth. So we do that a lot in build and in the programming that I do for Jim Jones. And then I put CrossFit at the end because, like I said, I've seen a lot of people get hypertrophy from CrossFit. And it's weird because it does go kind of against a lot of like science that you learn in textbooks. It goes against a lot of hypertrophy protocols. But I do think there's something in the stimulus, in the short rest periods, in the competitive nature of it, in the really pushing the body somewhere, like I said, that it doesn't want to go, grinding out those reps. I think there's something really exciting, especially in hypertrophy in women in CrossFit. If you look at a lot of like high-end athletes, high-end female athletes, that the hypertrophy that they've experienced is proportionally, I think, better than the men. And there's something really interesting in that, whether it is the short rest periods, whether it's just the high volume that those athletes are going through, whatever it may be. We're certainly seeing a lot of hypertrophy in CrossFit at a certain level. So I don't think it can be discounted. I think the problem with it is, for a lot of people, the technical aspects of CrossFit, get in the way of the volume and the hypertrophy. So if you're spending an hour class like learning how to do a snatch, that's not going to get you hypertrophy. If you're experienced and you can get a lot of volume out of like snatches and squat cleans and rope climbs and all that kind of stuff, and muscle ups, if you can get the volume in, then you're going to experience hypertrophy. But if you're not good enough to get the volume in, if you don't have that skill set yet, then perhaps you're not going to see the kind of hypertrophy that you want. So maybe there are other avenues that are going to be better for you. A lot of the stuff that I do, a lot of the stuff that I program is just dumb stuff. It's dumb, easy stuff. Like it's bench pressing, it's deadlifting, it's squatting, it's carrying stuff, stuff that, not that, there isn't technique involved, because of course it is. We all have to recognize, correct form and correct structures. But there is nothing overly complicated about the stuff that I program when it comes to hypertrophy, because we are better off spending a good amount of time doing things that our body recognizes easily and can pattern easily. We don't want to spend a bunch of time trying to learn a skill if the goal is simply hypertrophy, if the goal is simply to grow the muscle. So sticking to our basics of our squats and our benches and our isolation movements, which don't require a lot of skill, are often better when it comes to hypertrophy. So we can't discount it as a method of hypertrophy, because I've seen it happen, but it may not be the most, what's the word? May not be the easiest way or the most efficient way to experience hypertrophy. Like I said, I've seen a lot of guys at the gym, especially in the beginning, first 3 to 6 months, if they go down the compete track. There's a guy at the gym right now, Blake, who's seen a ton of growth, like at least 20 pounds of muscle this year. Wow. Mainly doing CrossFit. He's now started to do some more hypertrophy stuff, but he's gained a lot of muscle. But he's taken the time to really learn, the skills that are required. But it does take time. So efficiently, maybe other ways are going to be more beneficial for you. But yeah, so when you combine these two things, when you combine the training protocols, which are going to focus on a degree of strength training and a degree of hypertrophy. Both are necessary for hypertrophy, I believe, if you are a natural athlete. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're a natural athlete, when you're not taking in any artificial testosterone or growth hormone or anything like that, we're always trying to find ways to stimulate that. And I find like lifting heavy, doing our big heavy compound lifts, like a heavy deadlifts and a heavy squats and a heavy bench, is a great way to stimulate growth hormone and testosterone if we're not supplementing it from anywhere else. If you are, taking in artificial steroids, anabolics, growth hormone, testosterone, it may be less necessary to stimulate it with heavy lifting. Although, I know a lot of lifters do, and it's of huge benefit to them. But I think if you are a natural lifter, then it becomes more important to still lift the big compound heavy weights in order to stimulate that, that growth hormone and that testosterone naturally. And for that reason, I also really like the power bodybuilding, Mike O'Hearn's kind of methodology, which we've also done a lot in Build, which is a certain amount of the week is spent lifting heavy, and a certain amount of the week is lifting more in the hypertrophy range. So, for example, we might do an upper body heavy session on the Monday. We might do an upper body volume session on the Thursday, with the Monday focusing more on the big heavy lifts, and the Thursday focusing more on the like medium hypertrophy type lifts. It's another great way to achieve hypertrophy naturally. So we have to combine that lifting, that style of lifting, with the strength and the volume, with the nutrition, with the caloric surplus, with the extra carbohydrates, with the extra fats, and with the consistent protein. Both of these things, and I cannot stress this enough, need consistency. You have to train consistently, and you have to eat consistently if you want to gain real mass. Just as you do when you want to lean out. Mm-hmm. Both of these things take consistency. Whichever way you want to go, you can't just dip in and dip out. You can't do a week of growth and a week of leaning, and a week of growth and a week of leaning, and keep like jumping between the two things and expect to see any kind of meaningful results. It will not work that way. So whichever track you're on, you have to get on it, and you have to stay on it, and you have to stick with it until you get where you want to go. Makes sense?
No, absolutely.
The last thing I kind of want to talk about is, of course, sleep. And again, this is super important both for losing fat, leaning out, as it is for growing. When we sleep, we release the most growth hormone and testosterone. Growth hormone and testosterone is our biggest fat burner and our biggest muscle biggest muscle gainer. So we need those. We need that release. We need that hormone release, and we're going to get it. We're going to get it most when we sleep. So getting a good night's sleep is essential. If you're only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night, you're going to really struggle to gain weight, and you're going to really struggle to lose weight. You really want to be getting at least 7 or 8 hours if you want to, optimize your results. I know, I've read a lot of stuff, and I know a lot of the movie guys that went through, these big changes in a short amount of time. We're trying to get at least 10 hours a night. Now, I know that seems like a lot. I know it's hard for a lot of people in the real world to get that amount of sleep, to get that 10 hours in. But the more sleep and the more quality sleep you can get, the better it's going to be for your results. And of course, we've talked about, supplementing with magnesium before to help you with your sleep, with chamomile, with GABA to some degree. There's some great sleep supplements out there that can help. But yeah, I think really paying attention to your sleep, pay as much attention to your sleep as you do to your eating and your working out, if you want to see some meaningful results in a decent amount of time. So that's the other thing to consider there. The rest is important as the working out. The rest is when your body recovers. The rest is when your body grows. Your body doesn't really grow when you're working out. It grows while you're resting and while you're recovering. So pay a lot of attention to your sleep. So to summarize, guys, you need to be in a caloric surplus. Likelihood is that caloric surplus is going to come from taking in some extra carbohydrates and being aware of your fat content. Maybe bringing up your fats as well, and keeping your protein content consistent and your protein consumption consistent. Sticking with your training, being consistent with a kind of protocol that includes the hypertrophy type reps and sets with the heavier lifting as well. If you want to optimize results, and then really thinking about rest, really thinking about sleep. Thinking about supplementing sleep if necessary, and paying a lot of attention to that side of things. Only by virtue of those things, three things working together simultaneously, will you really get where you want to go. And don't expect it to happen in 3 weeks, because it won't. These are all longer term strategies. We have to take our time. We have to allow our bodies to either grow or lose weight, which either way we're going. And we have to, stick to the game plan and be consistent.
As well as adapt to the change that you want. Your body's got to relearn itself or get to a place that it can start accepting and absorbing and taking on this new systems you're trying to implement in there. It doesn't, like you said.
Set points take a while to sit in.
Yes.
So if I want to get my body to a new set point in terms of, my metabolism, if I want to be the kind of person that can always eat, 3,000 calories a day, I can't. I have to stay at a certain weight, and I have to stay at a certain protocol for a longer period of time. A lot of people will get down to a goal weight when they try and lose weight. So I'm gonna try and get down to 175 pounds. Oh, I got it. And then they start eating like they did before, and they go straight back up to 190 or whatever it was. You have to stay at 175 for at least 6 weeks before it's going to think, okay, 175. This is my new set point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can't just get somewhere and expect it to just stick. You have to get somewhere. You have to stay there. You have to work hard to stay there before that becomes your new set point. Same with gaining weight. If I want to stay, if I wanted to go up to 210 pounds, I want to stay 210 pounds. It would take a lot of work to stay there, a lot of nutrition, a lot of attention to stay at 210 pounds. If I get to 210 and I suddenly take my eye off the ball, then I'm going to go straight back down to 200. The body doesn't work like that. It doesn't want to. It wants to conserve. It doesn't want to stay a certain way unless you make it stay a certain way. You have to work hard to stay where you want to be. You can't just get there and expect it to stay there. It takes a lot of work, people. All right, guys, that's it for this week. If you have any questions, just fire them over to us. Thanks again for tuning in. Brandon, thanks for coming up again to the lodge. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon. We are fully open at Pharos Athletic Club, 1316 Glendale Boulevard. You can follow us on Instagram at Pharos Echo Park. And you can listen to this podcast, obviously, as you've already listened to it, on all good podcast stations. But we'll be back with you guys soon. And if you want to optimize hypertrophy, do not drink too much Coors Banquet.
Just one. Coffee next.
Just one and then coffee.
And then pizza.
And then pizza. All right, guys. Take care. Speak soon. Bye.